When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: Pay It Forward. User: Brook Gallery. Posted May 21st, 1999.
You know those old Scooby-Doo shows where someone would inherit a haunted house from some uncle they didn't know, and the one stipulation in the will was that in order to keep it, they had to spend a single night there? It's a ridiculous old cliche, right? Well, that ridiculous cliche, or at least a version of it, happened to me last year. I'm an artist living in New York, and for years I've barely been hanging on by my fingernails to a studio in Bed-Stuy. The waitressing shifts I pull in between commissions and sales barely make my expenses. I won't lie, it's been hard, and more than a few times I've seriously considered upping stakes to Jersey or maybe Rhode Island. Then, in December, I got a phone call from a lawyer I didn't know, asking me to come to an office across from Battery Park to discuss an inheritance. In an office far nicer than anything I was used to, I learned that I was there because of Cheryl, a distant aunt on my mother's side. I had only vague recollections of her from a family function as a kid, but apparently she'd taken a shine to me, keeping tabs over the years. According to the lawyer, Cheryl had been a successful attorney turned wise investor, putting her money into several bubbles, always knowing just the right time to get out. Her true love, however, had been art, and while she'd never taken the time to develop her own talent, she admired that I had. When she died in November, half her estate had been earmarked for several charities and humanitarian funds around New York, and the other half, plus her townhouse, was left to me. It would be hard to describe how shocked I was. Imagine someone telling you that the single most stressful thing in your life, in my case, the constant fear I might have to choose between, say, rent and food, was gone. It was difficult to accept. It still is, really. Once the lawyer had assured us this wasn't some grand prank, he said there was one stipulation, a catch. He cleared his throat and briefly looked uncomfortable, then said I would have to live in the house at least 300 days of the year in perpetuity. If I sold it, then of course I would be relieved of that obligation, but as long as I were to reside there, the 300-day limit had to be in effect. Naturally, I asked why. The lawyer hesitated, glancing briefly out the window before explaining that Cheryl, in addition to her love of the arts, had more esoteric interests. She had purchased this particular townhouse, he said, because it was said to be haunted. Not only that, but she claimed to have made friends with the ghost which haunted it, a lonely spirit who looked after those who looked after it. She attributed her success in the financial markets to the spirit's influence and wanted me to benefit the way she had. So long as I kept the ghost company, the house would be mine. It was her way of thanking him or her for the years of good fortune. Now, I was sure this had to be a prank, and yet the lawyer, stone-faced, insisted it was very real. I barely needed to talk about whether or not I would accept. Had I ever spent more than 5 nights away from home? With the necessary paperwork signed, the house, along with enough money to keep me in watercolor and cigarettes for the rest of my life, so long as I didn't pick up a coke habit, was mine. I moved in 2 weeks later. Putting someone used to making do with 400 square feet of living space into a 5-story brownstone with more than 10,000 is a little like letting an indoor cat roam around an airplane hangar. Cheryl's physical belongings had been liquidated as part of the estate willed to charity, leaving my single mattress and weather-beaten couch for furniture. Every noise echoed off the brick walls and hardwood floors, and I felt an inexplicable flash of anger at the thought she had been living like this while I was scraping out a living in one of the worst parts of the city. As the angry thought arose, a competing voice opposed it, calming me. After all, we'd ended up here, hadn't we? Maybe if I hadn't been through what I had, instead of appreciating what was happening, I'd have pissed it all away like most people who win the lottery. It was my own thought, sure, and it was right, but for it to soothe me so quickly seemed strange. Later on, I met what I think was its source. I slept on the first level that night, my ratty mattress almost an insult to the floor it was placed on. It's always taken me a while to get to sleep. I lay there for what must have been hours, staring up at the patterned carvings on the ceiling. My ceiling, I realized. Bought, paid for, and mine. Sure, I hadn't been the one to pay, but who cares? Show me a successful artist in Manhattan, and I'll show you an artist living on someone else's dime. These thoughts and my attempt to reconcile myself to newly being one of those trust funders were circling around my head when I first noticed the eyes. At the foot of my mattress, maybe 6 feet off the ground, was a pair of glowing white orbs. Not eyes in the traditional sense, they were nonetheless looking at me, of that I was certain. The lawyer's story of Cheryl's interest in what he called the esoteric had been, if not forgotten, relegated to a far corner of my mind. I did what you do in a situation like that. I screamed. The light seemed startled as well, sliding away and vanishing as if whatever had been looking at me had quickly turned away. Those eyes stayed on my mind all the next day, and after going to bed, I waited for them to make a reappearance that never came. In fact, that was the last time I've actually seen something in the house. I have heard it, however, and it's always steered me in a direction that allowed me to advance personally or professionally. For example, an artist friend of mine, Annie, was having a gallery opening in Soho, and I very much didn't want to go. Annie is one of the trust funders I mentioned earlier. Her sweetness can't make up for the anodyne, lifeless quality of her work, and if not for her father's connections in the business community, she'd never have gotten out of a shared studio space in my old neighborhood. Going to her opening meant having meaningless conversations with people who have more business cards than original ideas. She had no idea about my windfall, no one did yet, so I was about to call and beg off with the excuse of having to work when that same internal voice that had calmed me on my first day interjected. "If you don't go," it said, "you won't meet him." Who him was, I didn't know. I wasn't in the market for new romance. The odds of meeting a useful contact at one of Annie's events was 1 in a million, and yet I looked around the brownstone's gorgeous kitchen, the phone receiver in my hand. Cheryl had said the house looked out for the people who looked out for it. I replaced the handset and gave the kitchen a solid once-over, wiping the counters, sweeping the floor, spot cleaning the windows that overlooked the living area. To the empty room, I said, Fair trade, buddy. Let's see what you got. That night at the opening, amid all the business school deadbeats who turned up to bag hippie art chicks, I met a man who introduced himself as Peter Gation. He did it so nonchalantly, it took me a moment to register what he'd said. For those of you not familiar with the scene, this would be like the Pope feeling the need to tell you his name. Peter is a huge figure in the New York club scene. Club USA, the Palladium, Tunnel, those are all him. He's also produced films and, to my surprise, was at least passingly familiar with my work. He told me to call his office to set up an appointment with his buyer. Ultimately, he ended up buying 5 of my paintings, more than I'd ever sold at a single time. I've been not poor for a year, so I can't say for sure whether the rush you get when a paycheck arrives ever goes away. My work has never been more popular, and yet every time the client's money comes through, I feel this relief and tension as my brain tries to calculate how long the payout will last until more work comes along. Maybe it never goes away. Maybe being poor leaves scars. The difference now is that once I let myself work through those competing emotions, I'm able to direct the money to a worthwhile cause. Food banks all around the city, foundations for struggling artists, friends trying to stretch little paydays far past their breaking point. My spectral friend has been here the whole time, and I'm willing to admit that he, or they, have been a big part of my personal growth. Whenever the urge to become bitter rises in me, that artist's tendency of bitchiness toward what others make, its calming voice brings me back to earth. Instead, I do my best to pay it forward.
Subject, Bonsai. User, Anonymous AF. Posted, November 12, 1997.
Technology used to be my job, but bonsai was my passion. There's a ritualistic quality to the careful trimming and shaping of the small trees which is immensely grounding. Those of us who spend hours staring at a screen, digging through other people's computer systems, need to connect with the natural world more than most. It's been my experience that those that don't have that outlet start to lose connection with their humanity. In fact, the ability of computer tech to separate us from our humanity has been on my mind a lot lately. As microchips become more complex, their processing power growing at an incredible rate, it's going to become easier and easier to live our lives in the virtual world. The notion used to excite me. What do? If you ask most people, they'd call me a hacker, even though the closest they've come to hacking is a god-awful movie. I prefer the term social engineer because, though hacking may be in the job description, it's actually the easiest part of the process. A hacker breaks into vulnerable systems remotely using a variety of tools. A social engineer understands you can get much further manipulating people than you can data alone. The phone is an extraordinary tool for this purpose. I once established a permanent line into the DMV just by pretending to be a cop who'd lost the specific phone number law enforcement used to make information requests. Half an hour later, and anything Officer Simpson wanted to know was forevermore only a phone call away. And if the phone won't do the trick, you have no idea how easy it is to make house calls to even highly secure office complexes. It's all a matter of knowing how to play people. These skills have allowed me to build a lucrative career in the field of corporate espionage, or at least it did. Betraying a client, though, that's a cardinal sin no matter who's paying you. And when you're dealing with the kind of people who have enough money to pay for someone like me, it goes from cardinal sin to mortal. That's why I've been on the run since December 1995 when I pulled the plug on New Sky. If you don't read tech news, you're not going to recognize that name. If you do, you'll know New Sky was the innovator in Silicon Valley. The things they were doing with chip architecture were unheard of, and if you believe the rumors, their skunkworks were working on things even more fantastic than that. Adding to the mystery was the fact their founder didn't have a background in computing. According to the papers, he made his money in salvage, mostly around the Mediterranean. The job came to me through the usual channels. The client had, through the use of another spy actually embedded in New Sky, come to learn of the existence of something internal communication referred to as the Source. From what they could gather before the spy dropped off the Earth, the Source was a kind of blueprint for all of New Sky's tech developments. Every sense advancement somehow sprung from this single resource. It was my job to steal it. Despite the company's reputation, getting inside was surprisingly easy. Back in the 80s, a computer prodigy named Robert Morris wrote a paper on how networks were vulnerable to what he called IP spoofing. Basically, tricking a target system into thinking your request is coming from within its own network. At the time, this was a completely theoretical concept, so no one bothered to build safeguards against it. 10 years later, a group of Israeli hackers developed a tool to do exactly what Morris had warned about, and a year after that, I used it to gain access to New Sky's internal network. I created a security profile for myself, complete with a personalized password to be used in the event of a lost access key. I gave myself Y-level access, their version of above top secret, then found a staff directory, learning the names of relevant personnel in order to sell the lies I would soon have to tell. Getting onto the New Sky campus wasn't hard. Once out of the car, I was James Whitman, a new engineer embarrassed at his own tardiness after only being with the company a short time. I ran up to the front door, my backpack bobbing behind me, waving excitedly at the security guard inside as I entered the lobby. He eyed me with suspicion as I approached. "Gord," I said, pretending like we'd spoken before. "How's it going, man?" He hesitated, taken aback by my familiarity. As a rule, if you act like you're known to them, people won't admit to not remembering you. Gord Tolman was no exception. "Oh, hey, I'm good. How are you?" I made an exasperated face. So late. I've been here 2 weeks and already I'm rolling in half an hour after I'm supposed to be." Gord made a face. I was new. That must be why he hadn't committed me to memory yet. He smiled. "I wouldn't worry about it. It's almost Christmas. Half the staff isn't here anyways. I doubt anyone will notice. Swipe your badge and you're good to go." I winced. "See, that's the thing. I'm late because I couldn't find my badge. Truth be told, Gord, and I'd appreciate you not telling anyone else, my old lady and I broke up last night. She didn't take it well, tossed half my stuff out the upstairs window before I could stop her. I didn't even realize the badge was missing until this morning." Gord chuckled. "Oh yeah, I've been there. Look, kid, those things are like gold around here, but you're new, so I'll cut you some slack. Give me your full name and personal verification code. We'll cancel the old pass and issue a new one." I recited the name and code phrase I'd programmed into my fake profile the night before. He tapped at his computer, eyes widening. Gord straightened up in his seat, becoming businesslike and deferential. "Y-level? Yes, sir. Right away, sir." He and fumbled for a pass in the drawer next to him, hurriedly imprinting it. "There you go, sir. My apologies for being so familiar. I didn't realize you were part of the dev team." I waved him off, trying to look magnanimous. "It's not a problem, Gord. It's our little secret." He nodded quickly. "Thank you, Mr. Whitman." "No, Gord. Thank you." I walked briskly into the elevator, swiping my pass again before hitting the button for sub-level 1. The doors opened on a nondescript, cubicle-lined office corridor, the walls a featureless institutional white. Distantly, I could hear typing. As Gord had mentioned, much of the staff was off for Christmas holidays, a fact I'd taken into account while planning my incursion. The goal was to get across Sub 1 to the source elevator without anyone seeing me. Too much interaction can shatter the illusion, like a dreamer processing external sound into the dream until there's too much of it and they have to wake up. Walking quickly, I moved along the wall of cubicles, making it all the way to the back of the large room without seeing a single other person. A set of heavy double doors waited for me. Another reader was affixed to the wall immediately adjacent. I swiped my badge, holding my breath until the red light above the reader changed to green. Exhaling, I pulled open the door and went through, finding myself in another long corridor, this one light blue. At the end was a single steel door marked decontamination. Above that was a security camera. God damn it. The heavy door swung open noiselessly, revealing a spotless, brightly lit metal chamber measuring roughly 10 feet by 10 feet. An airlock. I stepped in and was immediately sealed inside. A recorded feminine voice said, "Decontamination in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Air puffed all around me from invisible holes in the walls and ceilings, followed by a fine mist. The voice spoke again. "Please close your eyes. Ultraviolet beginning in 3. I did as she said, the bright blue flash still visible from behind my eyelids. "Decontamination complete. Please wait." There was a hiss as pressures equalized. Then the door in front of me popped open and my life was never the same again. I stepped out of the airlock into a nightmare. I was on the top level. Below me was a 4-story atrium, and at the center of it, a man, a giant really, his colossal body running the room's full height. He had been crucified on an ancient wooden cross, his arms bound by branches so perfectly formed they could only have grown around him. The giant's head hung down, a dark beard resting on his enormous, scarred chest. Jammed in his side below his ribs was a steel tube attached to cabling which led away out of sight. Atop his head was a circular ring also attached to a rat's nest of wiring. His other side, the one not pierced by steel, bore deep wounds as if parts of him had been cut away. The furrows were clotted with a thick, golden fluid. My mind struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. The atrium was silent except for the hum of hundreds of computer fans and a deep rumble I couldn't pinpoint. I tried to pull myself together. Whatever this was, there was a job to do. My steps echoed down flight after flight of stairs until I reached the lab floor. The rumbling was louder now, a slow but steady rhythm. In front of me was a warren of computer terminals and lab equipment, desks piled high with printouts. A wallpaper of schematics and diagrams were pinned to the cubicles. I took a shuddering breath. Ignore the giant, find the source, I told myself. Then we get out of here and forget any of this happened. The computers were password protected. Of course, password is only as good as the human remembering it, and It only took 4 desk drawers before I found someone who'd written down their login information. The New Sky Project Y drive was unlike anything I'd ever seen. There were diagrams of chip architecture light years beyond even the most advanced things that so far brought to market. Their sheer complexity was hard to grasp to a degree that, according to emails I found, their production was being held up by the simple fact of manufacturing technology not yet being advanced enough. There were numerous oblique mentions to the source, but nothing concrete until I found a series of communications between New Sky's founder and Project Y's chief technical officer. They mentioned it repeatedly, describing it the way you might a living thing in need of care. How I might talk about one of my bonsais, feeding, watering, maximum stress thresholds. The rumbling that had been a constant backdrop to my snooping suddenly hitched, and one of the assembled computers sounded an alarm. I looked up to see the giant shifting in place, its huge face creased in pain. A moment later, he settled and the alarm stopped. Suddenly, it was so obvious I couldn't believe it had taken me this long to figure it out. The crucified giant was the source. All their future tech had come from examining forcibly extracted genetic material, a wonder of the world reduced to a mineral resource. The backpack seemed laughable now, a sick joke. Would the client even believe me if I came back empty-handed? They couldn't do jack shit with the schematics in front of me. No one would be able to make use of them for years. I'd have to carve off part of him like a rabbit's foot. The thought turned my stomach. I'm not a moral man. You can't do what I do and be a nice person, but everyone has their limit. This was mine. I'm happy to lie, cheat, and steal, but the thought of turning a blind eye to this felt damning in ways it's hard to fully explain. I knew what I had to do, that my old life was over. I started typing. The New Sky system was air-gapped, meaning it had no connection to any external network contained to this room. I began the process of formatting each workstation and server in the atrium, destroying every single digital record of Project Y and writing over the empty space repeatedly so it could never be recovered. Once that was done, I used reams of printouts to block the heat exhaust of several servers, then dumped a highly flammable isopropyl cleaner over everything. It wouldn't take long for the accumulated heat to do the rest. Finally, I looked up at the giant, my source. Before wiping everything, I found the files diagramming the system New Sky was using to keep him alive. It boiled down to the steel feeding tube embedded in his side. He was big enough that he needed a constant stream of nutrients circulating through his body that done so much damage to him, he couldn't function on his own anymore. Without the tube, he'd be comatose in minutes, dead not long after. It was the best I could do. From below, the giant was so still he looked like a statue. The rumbling, his breath barely moved his chest at all. I laid my hand on his exposed leg, feeling its warmth. He smelled of a spice I couldn't name and conjured images of a life that wasn't my own. A desert next to the sea, olive trees, the company of friends. I'm sorry. I didn't know if I was apologizing for what I was about to do, what had already been done, or all of it. I gripped the cabling attached to the steel needle and pulled. It resisted on the first try, and I tugged harder, my arms straining until at last I felt it give. From there, the needle glided out smoothly until it clanked onto the floor. The same golden yellow fluid I'd seen clotting on its other side ran out of the hole. Alarms began sounding. The giant twitched, its pain-racked face relaxing into an almost beatific expression. He was dying, but seemed at peace. I ignored the alarms, my hand on his leg, until the rumbling of his breath slowed to a stop. Smoke began to billow out from the stacks of paper. When I was sure he was gone, I ran for the stairs, flames licking up behind me. I haven't stopped running since.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.